Hi everyone, welcome to this video. It's going to be a debrief of some of the stuff going through the data here that we did on the dyno. If you haven't seen that video already of us thrashing the RX-7, hit pause on this one now, go over to fullBOOST and take a look at that. We made 767 horsepower in the end, which was a great result, and even better was it drove itself onto the trailer. So that's really the ideal scenario every time you go to the dyno, isn't it? So. All right, without further ado, let's get into some of these numbers. All right, so all up, I think we did maybe about 18 or 20 pulls, so it was a pretty decent dyno session. Went for a fair while. Now, what I've got here is essentially three tune-ups. I'm not going to go through all 20 of them. That's it's a bit silly in it. So I'm just going to go through just these three of them in a little bit of detail, not too much detail. I don't want to be too overly boring in that, but just want to show you some things where I guess just relying on an air fuel ratio meter, can sometimes maybe bring you unstuck. And I know a lot of people, a lot of tuners may be getting into it these days. Even myself, I'm not a professional tuner. I'm just doing it myself on working out of my own garage here and learning as I go, sort of thing. But I guess there's a myriad of things you can look at to tell you what the engine's sort of doing, sort of thing. So. If we look here at the, let's start with this one. So this is, as you can see, the file. I name the file names pretty specifically when I'm tuning as well. And what I like to do is get into a habit of saving every single pull, opening it, looking at the data, but then saving that file and saving it under very specific name so I know exactly what it was. So this was essentially what it says here. I've got the dyno, it was the dyno, and then I've got the date, which was the 8th of January 2022, and then I've got the boost we ran, which is 29 PSI, that was the target sort of boost, and then just a little comment on the end of it. So this is rich 3, which means it was the third pull I did, and it was still a little bit on the rich side. So how I can see that now, if I look at this specific pull here, there's a couple of things I can see. So if we go through some of the stuff here, this dark green trace here is RPM. This light green one here is EGT of the rear cylinder. This is EGT of the front cylinder, or rotor, of course. This is boost, you can see it ramping up. O2 target, which is this yellowy line. This one here, which now looks grey, is the O2 target, and O2 general is basically, that's what it is in the dump pipe. So if we look at those lines there, what we can see overall is a couple of things. First off, we look at the RPM trace. So I felt it in the car, when you can feel it's not revving cleanly. You can hear it sort of misfiring. You would have heard that in a couple of the videos. What you can see here is that the RPM trace is nice and smooth, and then all of a sudden it becomes really lumpy, and it's having a hard time revving. And then also you see boost start climbing, and then it falls right off. Like you can see boost falling off here to 24 pounds. So we were targeting, basically this should have been 29, 30 pound pull. We're down to 24 pound because it's so it's not clean. Another hint before even looking at air fuel ratio is you can see the EGT here where it's a little bit rich here, and then it comes back on target. It's a little bit lean, if anything, here. But if you have a look at the EGT data there, I'll just bring up this one. So you can see there it's like 590, 590, 590, 600, low 600. So it's pretty flat. It's following a pretty good curve. It's staying in its target, and then you can see where the air fuel ratio consistently dips below the target here. You can see what happens to EGT. It starts getting colder again. 620, 621, 618, 611. And then when we get to about here, this is where I'd say trust that meter with with a grain of salt sort of thing. But compiling with other data really tells you something. So what you see here is that the air fuel ratio data is saying like, oh, it's a little bit, it's rich. It's 3.3. You're targeting 3.5. It's not overly rich, but what you can see is the RPM trace, it won't rev. Boost is dropping off, and EGT is absolutely falling off a cliff. So you can see down here by 8,800 RPM, we're down 24 pound of boost, and this number here, as you can see over to the left here where we've got all the numbers, it's now 488 degrees. So I guess the temperature range we're probably looking for on methanol is around 700, low 700s. So it'll be at 488 degrees. What that tells me is raw methanol is soaking that sensor and absolutely cooling it down. And that's what this really lumpy RPM chase would mean. Making no boost because we're not basically exploding the mixture and causing exhaust gas and huge exhaust gas velocity. Our air fuel ratio meter says, right here, it says we're almost on target. So that's where, if you're just going to look at an air fuel ratio meter and just take that as gospel, the rest of the data here says otherwise. So if you were to go to the racetrack and say, yeah, okay, this is not so bad, I'm pretty sure this pool made something like 570 or 590 horsepower. And then once I cleaned all this up, the next pool made 713 horsepower. Still a little bit rich, actually, to tell you the truth. I haven't got the dyno for that here, but it was still a little bit rich. So, and that's what the common theme is you'll see throughout most of this, is that all the pools were left just a little bit rich. So when I'm at the track, I can pull them back a bit. And what I'm going to show you on the next pool is where I didn't want to leave tune-ups, and that even though they made significantly more power. So yeah, the difference between what it says here is only a little bit, that's like sort of 5% rich. It's not. It was obviously significantly away from the target and that. So we corrected at the next one and it revved pretty cleanly. So if we go to this next pool, this was at 22 PSI, and you can see here the dreaded lean. This was the only sort of pool on the leaner side. I'll bring this a bit here so it's a little bit more accurate to what we're looking at. Okay, so you'll see here that it looks like it's revving pretty clean. It's revved really clean throughout the rev range, and then it stopped. You can almost see it. It stops revving right here, and then it sort of cleans up, and then it's really slow, and then it falls off the curve again because, again, you can see it's gone really, really rich here. So what you'll see through here is one thing here. You see the O2 correction is at 10%. So this was still at a stage where I was allowing the ECU to add fuel, I guess. Which is not too bad of a safety sort of margin when you're on the dyno, but I'll show you something later on the last pool. Just check if it's on. Yeah, it is. All right, that's fine. But yeah, you'll see here again, the EGTs, you'll see all the way through here, as soon as it starts to go a little bit lean, look at the EGT climb a little bit. So we're at 600, 600, 600. I need to sort out a bit of the front to rear bias here, so to speak, the tune-up. So I'll probably add about 5% into this one to bring the temps down. But you'll see here, yeah, we're a little bit rich and we're at 614 degrees. And then here's sort of a crossover. We're at 632, and then it starts going a little bit lean, and you can see they're about 647, but they're still pretty consistent. So it's not really, it's not really panic stations or anything. But what you can see here, the rear rotor is starting to it's starting to climb more. It's getting up to, it is getting a bit hot. It's getting up to 780 there, sort of thing. So, that's just, there's a fair bit of split. There's a 100-degree split here, although the spark plugs don't really look like there's a 100-degree split between them anyway. But then you'll see as soon as it goes rich, add fuel and it's straight back to 750, but it's not really revving that cleanly. But if we'd been on, the right tune up all the way along here. It may have held, these, low 700s, 730 all the way through here. So overall, yeah, it's not too bad. Boost control's really good there from the Fueltech. So again, yeah, so this one's, although it's lean, it's not hugely lean. It's 20 pounder boost. I mean, my targets are a little bit rich as well. I mean, realistically, 20 pounder boost, we could be targeting 4.0, 4.1 anyway there. So I mean, we're pretty much, we're pretty much at the target there, and that's what our EGTs really tell us anyway. To be at like, if we look at this EGT here, to be at 730 or whatever, that's fine. Realistically, that's a-okay. So even though I look at this and it's like, oh, it's lean based on where my target is, it does start to, when it's continuously at that 4.2 range, whatever it is, probably starting to put a bit too much heat. But overall, no, it gets really rich at the ends, but overall that's not too bad. I'm not too worried about that. All right, if we look at the last run here, 35 PSI we have, which was the 767 horsepower run. You can see a couple of things. If we go to the RPM trace, you'll see here that it's pretty flat. It's pretty flat. It's pretty flat. It goes, it's still climbing. It's the ramp rate's not, it's not a super fast ramp rate or anything. It's not. That's what it's like. Life's like with an auto and a converter. So it's getting there, but it gets to here and it starts getting really flat here, and you can see what happens. It's sort of like it's really rich here, and again, what you'll see, and then it sort of cleans up, and then it and then if anything, it's sort of climbing again to that. But and you'll see the boost drop off here. So what you'll see happen here again. So we've got probably a little bit rich under here, and you can see the EGTs were 750, we're at 20 pounder boost, and then it goes a bit rich here and they come down, and then it goes back to our target and they slowly come back up here. But what happens here around, we're about 8,600 RPM, is it starts getting lean. You'll see it go from, whatever it is, 640, 740 EGT, to a peak up to here about 770. Again, it's not, 770 is not extraordinarily bad, but yeah, and then it sort of maintains up there at that 770 or whatever. But just the thing I want to highlight here, I guess, is two parts you'll see here is that you'll see an oscillation up and down, almost like a sine wave sort of thing, like an AC current sort of almost. And that's the closed loop system adding fuel. So you can see here 6% of fuel being added. So back here there was 0. And then it's just, what happens is it sees that it's getting lean and it does its job and it starts adding fuel and it's adding more. So it's, if we go back here, nothing, then 0.1, 0.5, 1.5, 3, 5, up to a peak of 6, and it's holding that 6, and then it's slowly and then it's starting to drop off, but it's, this is over a point of 13.4 to say, almost sort of 14 seconds. So that's 0.6 of a second that it's having to take, so to speak, to catch it, put fuel in, realize now that it's put fuel in, that the fuel is still there, and now it needs to take the fuel back out again, and then it's back on target. So when I'm at the racetrack, I won't actually run closed loop in a large amount. So here I must have had 6 or 7% in the closed loop. I didn't actually think I had that much in the closed loop, but anyway. But yeah, if I'm going to have anything in it, just so I might have 1 or 2% or 2 or 3% or something. But 6% makes a fair difference to your sort of tune-up. But that's where it's up to me as a tuner to make sure that my tune-up isn't, is within, that window of 1 to 2% sort of thing or whatever. So I don't want the ECU having to grab this, add extra fuel, because at the point of here where it's back on target, this extra whatever that is, 0.4 of a second, almost half a second, or a quarter of a second or whatever, it's incredibly rich, which means the car won't accelerate, it may misfire, it's definitely not going to make horsepower in that. So I need to make sure that when I'm at the track that that we don't have lean areas or whatever. I think this one here will be about 7250, I'd assume. Yep. So the reason why it's here is because this would have been the first or the second puller here. From what I can tell, peak torque on this setup is around about low 7,000 RPM, like 7250 RPM is where peak torque is. And peak horsepower is probably around, is 9,000 plus RPM, really. So, if we look at, so that's basically that. Those EGTs aren't too bad. Front rotors too cold, rear rotors right. So once we even those up as well, we'll make more horsepower again, because here you'd say the front rotor is probably too rich and the rear rotor is a little bit lean, so it's sort of evening it out. But once we get them both on song, they'll be fine. What you can see here in our fuel table is, obviously it looks a lot more like a VE curve more than if you're used to looking at Microtech. The Microtech normally didn't look like this. It looked very linear and very flat, which is why it took me a bit to get on top of tuning some of this at first, because I was just so used to tuning a lot of Microtech stuff that you would sort of carry, if this was like 8 milliseconds, it would almost sort of carry 8.5, whatever milliseconds here, and almost go higher as it went on. Whereas this is, obviously, volumetric efficiency, where, the engine's most efficient, it needs the most amount of fuel, and then as it gets less efficient, you need less fuel. So this is what it looks like at the moment. There's more fuel here in these lines here, because the secondaries don't work at that point, and then they come on, and then obviously they're sort of a carbon copy of each other. But if I just look at the closed loop, that's obviously our targets, but the closed loop limits, you can see here I've got 5 there. What I'll be doing when I'm racing is that'll be 2, this will be maybe 3, 4, 5, and whatever and that. But I don't want it taking out any of the fuel, because it might take too long to put it back in. But yeah, it's all working really well. Really impressed with how everything's working. Other part of tuning is reading spark plugs. These spark plugs are 2 runs old. I'm not very good at reading spark plugs with rotaries. I've never really had to do it before. So what you'll see there is, they're very, you might look at that and think, oh, they look very rich, or they look very burnt or something. That's the cylinder lube and the castor oil in the fuel. It obviously burns and bakes into the cadmium. So what happened is, obviously, I pulled these plugs out. I didn't go to read them for about a day and a half afterwards. So that's, it's really burnt on in there, but there's no heat down the threads or anything like that. There's no burning down the threads. It doesn't look like there's any major heat in the plugs. They also look very, very even, which, again, when the EGTs show 100 degrees different, doesn't really look like there's 100 degree temp difference between the two, but that's fine. Pretty much everything's right to go now. I'm sure when I get to the track, the first few passes won't be overly clean in terms of the tune-up. So I know it's been left overly rich, so we still may have little areas where it's a little bit lean, and more than likely a lot of the area where it's very rich. But that's the way I want it. I'd rather it be a little bit rich and, you know, carry on a little bit, and I can feel that and get off the throttle and then come back and look at the data and fix it, than it to be, you know, significantly lean and not catch it quick enough or not notice it because I'm busy driving or something, and it'll just toast the engine. So overall, pretty successful day. Like I said in the video on fullBOOST, I didn't really have a power figure in mind, or I sort of did. I mean, I was really hoping it would make around that 750 horsepower. I know it's like methanol and it's got a big 88mm turbo, but you just don't know. I mean, I don't know. It's the first time I've tuned something with an 88mm turbo and on methanol. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure, I got no doubt I could have stayed there for another couple of hours and just kept on refining stuff and made it absolutely perfect, and made, you know, 850 plus on similar kind of boost with getting everything right and maybe adding a couple of degrees of timing here and there. But, you know, this car's not there to build, you know, I built the car to have fun, you know, to go to the racetrack and have fun like I did with the 626, just on a, you know, a bigger and better scale. So, you know, I'm not looking to run the fastest time in some made up, you know, nonsense class or whatever, and that I just want to go to Heathcote and have fun. It's not a competition car, you know. We're not going to travel Australia racing and all the way over the seas or whatever racing. This is, you know, we'll more than likely race at Heathcote. We might take it to Jamboree interstate and that, but, you know, that's if we can get out there and that. But this is just a fun car. Racing is just a hobby. It's not a, you know, it's not something I take overly seriously. So, and, you know, this comes out of, you know, my pocket. Like, so if I hurt this, it's, you know, it costs money. So I'd rather to always be really, really cautious than just swinging for the fences and hoping for the best and just having 3 spare engines in the pits, like I saw at World Cup finals when I went over there to the US a few years ago. So yeah, the next step is to take it to Heathcote Park. So Heathcote Park Raceway is actually closed this weekend as well as next weekend, so it'll be open on the 30th. So we will be going out on the 30th of January. And yeah, we'll just give it some shakedowns, have some fun, see how we go, and that's about it.